Welcome to another Beetlejuice video on Bentley House Minis. Now I was going to make another I've done nothing joke, except something has happened since the last video. I didn't do it, but let me show you. So what you're seeing here is the base for the Beetlejuice project. It is lifted off of that table that I showed you in one of the first videos. It's a folding table. I had the legs cut a little bit shorter so that this base could be built. The bottom part of the base is the same size as the table, and then it kind of curves out to give me just a little bit more room for the house to sit on, and so I can create some of the lawn. In a future video, I will be finishing off this base, and so I'll give you a little bit more information and show it a little bit better now. But there are 4 individual sections built into the base, so I can make 4 different parts of the underworld. Actually, there's 5 areas. There's one area that is made for some wiring and possibly some electrical panels so that the house lights up. There's also a hole that goes through the top all the way through the bottom, through the table, so that I can plug the project in, hopefully. I had the same friend who built the Addams Family base build this for me, and I'm so thankful. This is something that I won't have to be doing. I will show you the plans and drawings in the future video on the base, but I wanted to go ahead and show it to you, and I will show you the floor plan sitting on the base so you can see it. So I'm gonna go get it. Hold on. This is currently the floor plan on the base. I probably will build up some of the hill so it may even sit a little bit higher, but I've got a lot more room than in my original drawing just because I did these curve up pieces in the design. So I'm very happy to have this. Beetlejuice has a home. It no longer has to sit on top of whatever flat surface I can find. There's an actual safe spot for it to exist. In this video, I am going to be finishing off the dining room, which includes this magnet wall that I created previously. This is actually supposed to be the sculpture display area where Delia puts her sculptures. It includes a very blue glass wall that I've actually been working on for the past 2 days before I'm recording this, and it's been a chore. And then I also need to build out this area so there's room to put the sculptures whenever those are created. So that may seem like not much is getting done in this video, but I have news. I have decided to do BeetleGust. In the past, I've done Addams October. As you know, the Addams Family project is complete. And I know it seems like October would be the most appropriate month to do all Beetlejuice all month long, but my October this year is already looking pretty packed. So I'm thinking August would be a great time to do that, and luckily that's just next month, so we don't have to wait very long. So all month of August I am going to be doing Beetlejuice projects, hopefully to boost my progress and get a little bit more done here. So without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and show you the footage of me making this window, which I thought was going to be pretty straightforward, and then I'll be back to build out this back window area. So my plan for this glass block wall is to 3D print the grout lines that go in between each square. I figured this would be the easiest way to make it look realistic and also not depend on myself on getting everything lined up perfectly. The grout lines are printed beforehand, and so they should stay in place. I printed 2 of these. They are an 1/8 inch thick, and my plan is to fill them with resin 1 square at a time, and then hopefully I will sandwich blue in between these so that both sides look like they're blue glass block. That's the plan. I'm working on top of a silicone mat for this, and I'm using some Fabrifix glue to go all the way around the very edge. I'm not doing every single line, but just the very outside border of the grid, and I'm gluing it down to the silicone. This will be easy to take off later as the glue doesn't really stick to the silicone that well. I'm going to be using UV resin for this project. However, since then I've kind of mentioned on Facebook and Instagram about how this bubbled really badly, and many people suggested using a two-part resin instead. There is a lot of glass block in this house, and so I will have a chance to try and create this effect again, and next time I might end up using two-part resin. But for now, for this one, I'm using UV resin, and I filled in a couple rows of glass block, and I'm starting with my UV light pretty far away from it and slowly getting closer and closer. This helps keep down the amount of heat that's being created by the UV resin, and it helps prevent warp. As you will see later on, it didn't completely help prevent warp, but it helped during this process. I'm going back and forth. I'm kind of looking at the lights. You can see the light reflecting off of the resin to try and figure out which areas need another drop or so to get the resin up to the very top of the grid. You can start to see as I'm pushing on the mat that it is starting to warp, and my glue is holding on at this moment. It doesn't the entire time. I could still see that there was some uncured resin at the very bottom of each individual cell, so I put some 1, 2, 3 blocks on top of the grid. This didn't affect the resin because it was already cured on top. And then I did a more focused cure by making sure the light was really close to the grid. I continued this all the way through, trying to go slowly. This was a very slow process. It was slower than I thought it would be, and in the end I ended up with quite a few bubbles. These bubbles didn't appear when I first started curing the resin. It was like the top layer cured, and then all of a sudden these bubbles started coming up from underneath. After the initial cure with the flashlight, I used a larger UV light and did a longer cure just to make sure that all of the liquid resin was completely hardened. Now I can peel it off of my mat. As you can see, it's already detached in a couple areas. This is because it did start to curve, and it was just a little bit at first. I think this was from the larger UV light, and then it curves a little bit more later on. I'm going to also have to clean off my mat and make sure that all of that resin is cured as well. At this point, I was still considering doing the double grid, both grids filled with resin, but before I could move to that, I needed to deal with these bubbles. They had gotten a little out of control, and I noticed that the bubbles were hollow from the back of the wall. So I was thinking I could possibly fill these bubbles in with a little bit more resin, cure them, and hopefully this would solve this problem, because once I started putting the blue paint on the wall, it would probably pool in those areas. This caused another problem because some of the bubbles went all the way through, the resin went through, and when it hit the wax paper I had underneath, it created these matte areas on the front of the wall. At this point, I was considering starting over because it went over the top of the grid and it just didn't look very nice, but I decided to continue forward because I'd already used a lot of resin, and filling in the bubbles was really starting to work. As you can see, they were kind of starting to disappear, and I was hoping that my next step of adding the polyacrylic would help with these matte blobs. So polyacrylic is something I've used before on polymer clay. It dries clear and it has a glossy finish, so I decided to cover the resin with that, and I thought this would also end up creating a smooth surface to put my glass paint on. As a result of all the bubbles and fixes, it wasn't super smooth and I wasn't sure how the paint would adhere. I ended up ordering this glass paint set. I will put a link in the description if you want to try it out. I really like this one because it had a high degree of light fastness, as it says on the front of the box, and because I want this dollhouse to last as long as possible, that's pretty important. Now, the box did not come with any instructions at all. It told me its qualities, but it didn't tell me how to use the paint, so I had to do a little bit of testing. I wanted to test out both of these blues to see what their colors were like, and so during this I can also test out how to apply the paint. I'm using a scrap piece of plastic, just some packaging, and a brush to try and figure out how to use this best. The brush technique did not work well. As you can see, it comes on really streaky and basically it just kind of moves it around, but it doesn't apply it very well. I applied the second blue with a little bit more of a blobbing type effect, and that's when I realized brushes probably weren't going to be the best way to do it. It's going to be applying it with some kind of tool where you can just really gunk it on there, if that's the term. A technical crafting term, gunk it on. It also dried really well, and I had a hard time picking it off, which was good because it meant that it would stick pretty well and it wasn't going to flake off like an acrylic paint would. I decided to do a 50-50 mix of the two blue paints just in case there wasn't enough for me to do the entire wall. These paint tubes were pretty small and I didn't want to run out of one color and then have to move to another color, so I just mixed them together, and that way hopefully I would have enough to cover the entire wall. I'm using a ball stylus to apply the paint and, as I said before, just kind of gunk it on there. I'm dabbing it all over each individual square, trying to make sure I cover it completely. I was doing it this way so hopefully you could still see the grout lines on the other side of the window, but in the end I go back and fix it, which I will show you. But doing it this way ended up making it look like there were just some bald areas or uncolored areas around the edges of the glass block, and I want it to look like it's pure blue glass block, so having that just really wasn't working for me. This is how it was looking the first time I did a coat, and I don't know if you can tell, but there are some areas where there were bubbles that I missed, and the paint kind of got into those areas. You can also still see the matte areas where the resin leaked through on the bottom, so still not perfect, not ideal, not what I was going for completely, but not a complete failure either. So I'm pretty happy with how it's looking. Here's where I'm talking about with the bubbles getting filled in with the paint. So yeah. This is the point where I had decided to cover up the edges or the grout lines, and this is going to be the back side of the window or the window that's going to be on the exterior of the house. I'm using the paint and just going over each and every grout line, making sure that it's kind of a thick line of this glass paint that I'm putting down so that it completely covers any of those areas that are looking like colorless areas or bald spots. This also gave the effect that each glass block was a little darker towards the edges or towards the outside of each cell, and I did like that look, so it was kind of a happy accident that I had to go back and do that. At this point, I was done messing with this part of the glass block wall and I was ready to move on. I needed to cut some resin off of the edge. Make sure if you do this, you are using eye protection because it can kind of go flying and you do not want that in your eye. Here you can see how much the wall has actually warped since I first started using it as compared to the wall that I hadn't worked on yet, and I decided not to mess with making a second part of the wall and sticking it onto the back. There was a chance that it would warp differently and not stick together at all. So my backup plan for this is to hand make a window piece that will go on this wall so I can directly make it on the warped wall so that everything matches. These are very thin basswood sticks that do curve pretty easily. I'm painting them white so I can basically just cut them and glue them in place. I'm not going to outline each and every single cell. I'm going to make it just look a little bit more like a craftsman style window. This will be seen from the exterior, so it makes sense that it might be a little bit different from the interior. I'm using my 1, 2, 3 blocks as I'm gluing things in place to make sure that they stick on with the curve of the warp. This is how it's looking. I'm pretty happy with it, and I even like the fact that the grout lines are covered with the blue paint. I'm also going to cover everything with polyacrylic. I don't know much about this glass paint and I don't want it kind of peeling off at any point, so covering it with the polyacrylic and covering the white frames of the window seemed to make sense in my head. We'll see how it goes. I also did notice at this point that some of the blue paint was coming off in the polyacrylic as I was working. It should have been permanent at this point because it dried overnight, but I wanted to make note of that in case you decide to try this for yourself. Here's how the wall looks with the light shining through it. I really do like the effect. As long as there's light behind it, I'm pretty happy with it. Here's how it looks the other way. I'm just not quite sure if light will always be on the wall, but I'm happy with it for now. I'm going to move forward with this wall. I really don't have the heart to redo it, even though there's some parts of it that I'm not happy with. But honestly, like, I have to remind myself that, like, this is the main focus for this video and for this particular project, but it's not the main focus of the Beetlejuice house, and it's okay if it's not 100% perfect. So I'm just gonna go ahead and use this wall and get started building the room. So I need to pop this wall out like this to make enough room for the sculptures. I'm probably going to just make it look like this was maybe another bay window addition onto the house. And then this will be inserted into foam board so it looks like the window that goes onto the bay window. So thankfully this is the magnet wall, so I can just pull it out and I'm ready to go. If you want more details on how I created the magnet wall, I will link that video down below in the description. This was a really great idea by some subscribers who left comments, and I think I'm going to be doing magnets throughout the house. I'm just hoping that the magnets will be able to hold this wall once I put the heavy resin block wall in place. I went ahead and cut out where the bay window is going to be, and then I can start building the room on the back, or the display area on the back, and I can then insert the block wall. Luckily, in one of my first building videos, I made a bunch of double thick foam board walls, and so I'm going to be using those and just cutting off pieces that I need to build out this bay window. This is the double thick foam board piece that you see me measuring and writing on at the moment. I am going to be making this bay window about 2.5 inches deep, and I'm hoping this will be enough room to put in the sculptures. Just a reminder, if you're following along or if you're making your own project out of foam board, make sure you are regularly changing out your craft knife blade. That is what's going to get you the best, straightest cuts. I'm adding some Fabri-Tac glue or Fabri-Fix glue on the side of the wall, and then I'm adding some hot glue on the two ends. The Fabri-Fix glue is going to hold over time, and the hot glue is going to immediately take hold so that I don't have to hold it in place while it dries. This is going to be one of the side walls for the sculpture display. I added the second wall off camera, and now I'm putting in the bottom part of the display. This piece is going to be helpful in making sure the two side walls are sitting at 90-degree angles, because at the moment they're kind of like a little bit wonky, as you can see. Putting this piece in, I can glue it to it, and then I know it will be sitting correctly. The phrase "glue it to it" should be like the Nike phrase, but of like the crafters world. Just glue it to it. I finished up the top of the room. As you can see, the bottom of the room is, or the bottom of the bay window, whatever you want to call it, is lifted up a little bit, and that's because I do want the sculptures to sit up a little higher on the floor. This way they can be easily seen over the dining room table. I'm now taking some of that same double thick foam board and I am cutting off a back area for this bay window. I'm not going to be gluing it on yet because I still have to cut a hole for our blue glass block wall. I'm putting the front part of the bay window on and tracing around the interior. This is going to let me know where the edges of my bump out are, and then I can use those to center my window on the wall where it's going to be seen through the bay window opening. I'm going to take a pencil and exactly trace around my window, so hopefully the plan is it will fit perfectly inside the opening. I'm popping it out and then I can go ahead and give it a try with this window. Fingers crossed one thing goes right with the window. It actually ended up fitting really well, and I even liked how it looked from the back side, or the side that's going to be the exterior of the window, although you really can tell that it's warped, especially once it's in a vertical or straight wall. But that's okay, we're just going to go with it. And as you can see, it is centered within the bay window, and so I think that'll probably look really good. I'm not going to glue the window into the wall yet because we have to do the finishes for the bay window itself. So just like I did in the past, I need to cover up the foam edges, and because I completely ruined my wood glue top, I'm just going to be basically sticking my finger into the bottle, getting some wood glue on my fingertip, and then running it along the foam board edges. This is going to dry and protect the foam board when I start using some spray paint. Any edge that I think the spray paint might touch, I need to make sure is covered so I don't have any foam board that melts. Once that's completely dry, I'm going to go outside someplace with a lot of ventilation and spray it with this gray paint. This is the same gray I used on the other part of the dining room, but in the movie, these walls look like smooth concrete, so I didn't end up using the texture part of the gray paint process that I did last time. So it's just flat and smooth. To make it look like concrete, I'm going to be splatter painting some really watered down white paint all over the surface after the spray paint has dried. To do this, I just put a lot of water with a little bit of white paint. I got it on the edge of my brush and started splattering anywhere that it should be a concrete surface. I'm going to do the same thing with a little bit of a darker gray. I don't want to do black, but I want to do a very dark gray so that you can see it against the gray that has been spray painted. Make sure you protect your work area if you do this because it does end up getting everywhere. I really like how this turned out, and I think it does look like concrete, at least in my opinion, and I'm pretty happy with the result. Now that I have this speckled and I have the back wall speckled and myself speckled, we can move on to inserting the glass block wall. Finally, we can put it into its final place. Once the wall was inside the foam board, I realized it just kind of stayed there with tension, so I'm not gluing it in yet. Just in case when I start working on the exterior, it's easier for me to pop it out and finish some things. I'm just leaving it in there. It's secure enough that it won't fall out. Hopefully, fingers crossed. So I'm just leaving it in place, but I can go ahead and glue the back wall to the front part of the bay window. And this is the result, and I'm pretty happy with it. Even with the ups and downs of this project, I'm pretty happy with the result, and I'm hoping Delia would be too. And also ignore the wings or the areas where the magnets are. They don't look very nice. All you'll be able to see when it's put in place is the nice frame around the bay window. Here you can see it going into its final place. Well, not final because it's removable, but it worked really well. The magnets were able to hold it in place even with the addition of the heavy resin wall. It holds really well. I probably still will put some supports underneath the window to make sure that it's not solely relying on the magnets. It also has some support from the ground. But in the end, I'm pretty happy with it. I think it works with the room. And I also pre-painted some trim that I'm trying to decide where to put it. I'm not committing to anything yet because I'm trying to think if I need to put it over the gap that's created by the magnet wall, or if it needs trim around the window opening, or if I should just leave it. Let me know what you think in the comments if you have any ideas. I'm not committing to anything yet. I'm just going to put those to the side and have those ready when I need it. Also, the sculptures need sand in the bottom, but I'm not going to put that in there until I have the sculptures ready to go. One final thing, I wanted to show you what the wall looks like with some light behind it. It'll probably never have light this bright behind it, but I really like the glow. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. This is the final video over decorating inside of the dining room. We still have the floor and the ceiling left to do, but I can't do the floor until I have more of the building done. I've been painting trim pieces as I go, so hopefully when it's time to put in the floor and everything else, it'll be really easy to use these pre-painted trims to finish up the room. Next week's video will be over the captain's quarters, and then the week after that I'm taking my final break for the summer, and then it will be BeetleGust or August, in which I will do Beetlejuice projects all month long, and hopefully we'll be able to get past just having one room. I hope you all have an amazing week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Just realized I'm like totally blocking my sign. I'll do the outro like this. It's not awkward. Can't get them facing all the same way. There we go. The end of this video. Yeah.